Let's move on to the Port Adelaide Football Club, who find themselves remarkably in the bottom 4 on the ladder with not a lot coming up in drafts. We know that they haven't been to the draft as much in the last few years with the recruitments of the likes of Jason Horton-Francis. It does beg the question, Damo, given how they're going right now, and you've been strong on the alternative, do they need to look at changing the handover plan?
Yeah, Sam, I was adamant at the start of the year, up until maybe a fortnight ago, that they needed to respect what they had set out to do, and that is to let Josh Carr coach under Ken Hinkley this year and to start round 1 2026. I've changed my view, and I've changed my view on the back of 3 beltings they've copped in already the space of 8 weeks in this season. The most recent one being against Geelong on the weekend, and prior to that, Western Bulldogs and Collingwood. And just in isolation, you can see what happens after half-time of those games. You obviously have a situation where they are not in the match at half-time, and then there is no resilience beyond that point. And to me, Lordo, Jimmy, Sam, that is now suggesting to me that they have checked out to a point, and to a very strong point, of the Ken Hinkley messaging. And I equally believe too, once you have made a decision about the future and the current arrangement's not working, it's not working. I mean, those beltings say it's not working. Why not start the future now?
Yeah, I'm starting to come towards Damo's point of view, but I always said this about Kenny Hinkley. He will honour the contract because that's what was put in front of him, and he shook his hand. And so he's that type of person, and that's good for football, that we actually honour contracts and people see it out. But I've mentioned this before too. I see too much of Port Adelaide, in particular the second half, and the numbers back up that if they're not within striking distance, they just quit. Now, that might be bringing in Josh Carr, might put them on edge because you're playing for the new coach. You know, does he like me? I'm almost auditioning for his side next year. But there are some factors. All teams have injuries. No Koch, Georgiades in the outside, no Marshall, no forward structure. But we talk about what we expect from a side as well. I didn't have him in my 8.
That's the way they're losing, Jim.
Yeah, and that's what I mentioned. Yeah. I think they just pull the pin too early at the moment, and that might be because the coach is not going to be there.
So this is where we all had them. So Lloyd had them finishing the highest of the 4 of us, just inside the 8, the others just outside. We actually said on this panel ahead of round 1 that it was a lose-lose situation. Yeah. And what's actually happening now, and this is, I'm not saying that this is right, but it's damaging Ken's legacy potentially on the way out, and it's not helping Josh's tenure, which technically hasn't started, and yet he is going to get seen as in part responsible for some of these performances.
Yeah, and I think some are describing it as a gap year for them, and I agree with that. And you can never waste a year at AFL level, but I think that's what they've set themselves up for. I've never seen this work. There may be the odd one that people can throw back at me, but when there's uncertainty around, whenever they say a coach can see out the season, they're gone within a week or 2. It just never happens because once you're gone, you're gone. So I think this decision should have been made at the end of last year. Once they knew Ken wasn't going to be their man, give it to Josh Carr.
When would you do it now, though?
Well, I just feel I'd be doing it now if they believe...
this week?
Yeah, if they believe, yes, this is not what's in the best interest for Port Adelaide. We can't waste another 13 weeks.
And you've been consistent on that view the whole way through. Sam, another issue too is the David Koch tenure. Now, he, as much as anyone, Ken Hinkley included, has transformed this footy club from what it once was, but he's eyeing off a potential spot on the AFL Commission as well, and not just a spot on the Commission, but potentially the chair of it. Now, a lot's to play out. Richard Gord is indicating he wants to go around again, and that will take a process that is not under the control of David Koch. But I raise that as a backdrop to the uncertainty and instability potentially at Port Adelaide as it wades through this Ken Hinkley to Josh Carr situation. You've got the chair of the club also unknown, and even his messaging last week, he chose to revisit the Willie Rioli situation in a very provocative way. We saw Luke Beveridge shoot him down, and then Ken Hinkley had to, as coach, mop up what David Koch did to start the week.
Indigenous players throughout their whole life have faced that sort of casual abuse.
So he was the subject of racism on the field in the week prior?
Well, it was, if you like, cultural disrespect during the game.
I can tell you, as a matter of fact, that the comments weren't culturally insensitive. I said at the time, Willie's made a mistake. We'll forgive him, we'll move on, he'll learn from it. I don't know, will he learn from it if his own club's enabling him by making excuses for him?
I think the club's on record with trying to make some change, and I think that's what we set out to do, was certainly not to point the finger at any individual, but other than say that as a competition we need to do better with lots of things in as far as the Indigenous players go, and I think that's the point we're trying to make. Certainly not lay blame on any individual.
felt a little messy, Damo, didn't it?
It was very messy.
That
yeah.
the coach had to try to clean up in the end.
Yeah, and the cultural insensitivity. I feel prior to that moment that Chris Davies, the head of the football department at Port Adelaide, handled it beautifully and actually forced a conversation to be had at the highest levels of the AFL and then the wider industry. And then David, I believe off script, just decided to then go down the initial allegation path, which, as we saw, Luke Beveridge had the right to defend his player on.
It sets up a perfect situation in the trade sphere for the goings-on of Zack Butters. Now, for those of you who aren't aware, he's a free agent at the end of next year, so ostensibly has 18 months left on a contract. He is one of the closest people to Ken Hinkley at the club, a Victorian from Bacchus Marsh. He's got a plethora of clubs looking to bring him back in, and he's having some questions asked of him. This is how the club has reacted.
Are you confident Butters would stay, even if you're not here next year?
Yeah, yes, I am.
What makes you so confident?
I just see the way he plays, I see the way he acts. His connection to this footy club is really, really strong.
I think the club's been very good with it. At the footy club, it doesn't really get spoken about. And yeah, like you said, it's still 18 months away, and yeah, it's going to be a big decision. But right now, it's probably not one that's front of mind. Like when the midst of an AFL season, and I want to get back to playing finals footy, and I think there's some bigger things probably at the forefront.
Sam, so as we sit here right now, and there's an article written by Cal Toomey saying that Port Adelaide will offer him the biggest deal in the history of their football club if he is to stay.
To keep him, yep.
So it'd be a 2-year plus a 6-year option after that.
Yep.
As we sit here right now, where do you expect him to play next year and potentially the year after that if he stays on at Port Adelaide?
I just think, given Port Adelaide don't have a lot of draft capital and they'll be looking to bring some back in, and I think given his closeness with Ken Hinkley, there may be a reset from both club and player. And I would have, if he was making the decision right now, my guess would be that he'd be playing for Hawthorn next year.
Hawthorn?
I think so. I think my belief is that Hawthorn have created space in their list. They probably know that Harley Reid will spend one more year at West Coast as it stands. I think they'll be putting most of their eggs in the Zack Butters basket.
Yeah, again, I hear you, and I hear the Hawthorn interest. So I wouldn't be ruling out Geelong or the Western Bulldogs in that conversation for next year as well.
He grew up barracking for the Western Bulldogs, and Geelong, because of what Jimmy's been able to do with the salary cap down there, I guess, is just always able to find extra room in the cap down the highway, don't they?
I don't know. I retired in 2016.
Hey, Sam, speaking of Geelong, geez, it was a good second half, a massive second half against Port Adelaide, and Jeremy Cameron lit up the Adelaide Oval, and it was off the back of Dangerfield going down. And I'm big on this. You know, I look at the targets there and how Jeremy Cameron is 15% inside 50 targets, and why. I don't know why they mess with him on a wing.
What should he be, Lloyd, in a percentage sense?
I think I'd be having him 30s.
Even with Dangerfield playing key position?
With Dangerfield, yeah.
So without Dangerfield, is it more than 30?
Now it should be, 35.
Yeah.
You don't want to go too much over that because suddenly you become a one-man band, but I just think you can see what he can do.
What were you at Essendon, just for context? Like, I know it was a different type of game
you'd
then.
have to say you'd be 40,
right,
in the 40s, yeah.
So amazing given his ability to impact
games. I know the game's gone past having one player and you've got to be careful of that, but he's too good to be sharing that much ball with the likes of Shannon Neal.